Do you believe from that research that the flow state is accessible to anybody?
Yeah, so flow science stretches back about 150 years. In fact, some of the earliest experiments ever run in kind of what's become cognitive neuroscience or what was experimental psychology were run on flow, right?
Hmm.
In the 60s and 70s and 80s, a guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who was the chairman of the University of Chicago Psychology Department, did what is kind of still to this day, I believe, the largest optimal psych study ever run. And it
Hmm.
was on flow. And he discovered a number of critical things. The first is the answer to your question, which is flow is ubiquitous. It shows up anywhere, anytime, provided certain initial conditions are met. So yes, everybody from kind of software coders in Mumbai to jazz musicians in Algeria to, believe it or not, and this was in his original study group, assembly line workers in Detroit and Chicago. So if you can
Really?
get into flow, yeah, Navajo sheep herders, by the way, Italian grape farmers, elderly Korean women, Japanese teenage motorcycle gang members. I mean, when I say he talked to everybody, he talked to everybody.
I
Uh,
guess.
yeah, and so if I always say, look, if you can get into flow on an assembly line, when I was in high school, I worked in a factory, and if you, it's miserable. It's the most miserable thing I ever did. And if
Sure.
you can get into flow working in a factory on an assembly line, you can get into flow doing anything.
That's like I said, I find that amazing. I mean, I think, but flow, and I know that you understand this. Flow seems to be, in the way that you're describing it, seems to be this elusive thing. It's like I was really in that place. I was in the flow of it all, and it was all happening. But shit, I don't know how I got there, and I got to wait for this great moment of inspiration or the muse, and then suddenly I'll be back in it. But it seems like what you're telling me, I'm guessing here, is that you've kind of broken it down into a science, and these are the steps.
So yeah, what couple things changed. First thing that changed is, and you know this because you know how fast technology is accelerating. Starting in the early 90s, neuroscience, biotechnology, et cetera, they started accelerating wildly, right?
Yes.
Biotechnology, for example, is currently moving at 5 times the speed of Moore's law. So it's literally doubling in power every 4 months,
Wow.
right? And this is impacting everything. Let me give you just one random example because it still blows my mind. I heard Fareed Zakaria say this the other day. Every day you're alive because of what is happening in biotechnology, you gain 5 hours of life expectancy, no exercise required. It's moving that fast.
Wow.
That's insane, I know. So it started driving neuroimaging and brain science forward, where we can peer deeper inside the brain than ever before.
Yes.
So what happened was, as you pointed out, up to this point, flow had been like lightning in a bottle. In fact, for the first 50 years we were looking at it, right, from like the 1870s until the 1950s, people didn't even know it was a separate, they thought it was a mystical experience, right? Literally, quote unquote.
Yeah,
It
quite
wasn't
literally.
until Abraham Maslow in the 50s came along and he had this huge study group, all of atheists, and they kept reporting flow. That was the first time anybody went, hey, wait a minute, maybe this isn't spiritual or mystical or religious. Maybe it's just normal people, right?
Right.
So, as you pointed out, it was mystified, it was weird, but we've looked under the hood. We now know, as a general rule, what's causing flow. We know, there are radical changes in normal brain function that occur during flow. We understand what those are. When you couple that, so this is why I worked on action adventure sport athletes. One of the problems with flow was subjective, right? If I want to know if you were in flow, I had to give you this subjective questionnaire. It was extremely well validated, great study, fantastic, but it was subjective. The goal of science is objectivity, right? It has to be.
Yeah.
So what happened over the past 25 years in action adventure sports is these men and women have gotten so good at what they're doing, and the level of performance has gone up so much that if they're actually not in flow when they're performing, they're going home in a body bag or they're going to the hospital. And this gave us something incredible. It was a hard data set with which to work. If these folks survived, if they lived to tell the tale, they were in flow. So we could take that, coupled with the neuroscience, and work backwards to what we call our flow triggers.
That's a pretty hard consequence.
It's a really hard consequence. And I've been in and around action adventure sports for a very long time. There's a reason I chose to work on it. And, we've lost a lot of people. I've lost a lot of friends. Dean Potter, who was on our board at the Flow Genome Project, passed away, a few months ago. So yes, the consequences are very, very severe. And, and very sad. But on the flip side, it gave us data, and we could work backwards to these flow triggers. And we've discovered 18 flow triggers. So these are preconditions that lead to more flow, and anybody can apply them, right? It's obviously, we worked on action adventure sport athletes, but that was just where to get them. Anybody can apply them in all walks of life. And it's sort of like your flow toolkit, right? You want more flow in your life? You don't have to use all 18. You can use 1, 5, and 7, or 3, 6. It doesn't really matter. You can take your pick. But by applying these things, and it's still, let's be clear, it's a state of consciousness. It's not a light switch, right? We don't have flow in a pill. And by the way, for anybody who has seen Limitless and wants their NZ40, right, we're nowhere close. I mean, we're years away.
I'm putting my hand up. I'll take a large order, please.
Leslie Dixon, who wrote Limitless, is a friend of mine.
Oh, really?
And every time I see her, I yell at her. I'm like, you have any idea how hard you have made my life? People come up to me. They're like, where's my Limitless flow pill? And
Absolutely.
We're nowhere close.
Damn.
So can't work it like a light switch.
Right.
But what we are seeing, just, in our classes alone, on average, people are reporting after like 6 weeks of training with this information, these triggers and whatever, and not full-time, part-time, people have lives and whatever. They were reporting a 5-fold increase in flow and a 5-fold increase in creativity and a 3-fold increase in self-confidence. These are coming through our trainings. Other people have other trainings. They're getting results that are, good as well. Ours seem to be really, really solid, and we're really, really, happy with it. So yes, this stuff is totally trainable. You want more flow in your lives? It's readily available.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.